So it's a question for Shaykh Yahya.
Come sit down.
When you were looking into the history of coffee, was there any discussion, maybe coffee was different back then, about the reliance, like your body's reliance or the crash when you're not drinking it? Because that's part of the reason why I think some people stay away is because of that constant need for it or that downer when you're not having it.
Yeah, so the sister's question was, is there any discussion that in the when we talk about look into the history of coffee of the implications of drinking coffee when it relates to your body, like the crash that happens and so forth, that when you don't drink it, or if you get addicted to it, for instance, and then overcoming the addiction. And I do think that that's a very valid thing. And as much as we would say everything that has already been said about coffee, it's from a medicinal standpoint that it's not necessarily for everyone, right? When we say that it's an Islamic drink, is that we mean that its origins are in the Muslim countries and so forth, and in general is that if we look at it from a medicinal standpoint, as all other plants and so forth, and that minerals as well that have temperaments, is that it's better for some people than others in that sense. And then it gets back ultimately to the reason that someone is using it. I think you could say from a spiritual perspective, there's no doubt that if you're making spiritual intentions behind the drinking of it, that my belief would be is that you would probably be prevented from some of the physical harms that it could potentially have, just from the blessing of the intention behind drinking it, although you wouldn't be able to explain that to a doctor who was rooted and immersed in evidence-based medicine. But I think there's something to be said for it. And I think, too, is that that there is that the way that it was cultivated, and probably as part of the story as well. I don't know too much about all of that, but I will say too, just in relation to my own self, I've stopped drinking coffee 3 times, and I get addicted very easy. Like my friend David Kearns, who I think snuck away again, he says he could stop in like 2 days. Like myself, the 3 times that I quit, it takes me between a month to 6 weeks to overcome it, because I get addicted very easily. And now I'm one of those 2-cuppers. I'm not a 3-cupper. Actually, it has an opposite effect on me when I drink 3. But it's caffeine is a drug, right? We know that. There's no doubt about that. However, it's also definitely from the realm of the mubahat. And so in the end, what I kind of came to is that, it's one of these things where that. So let me just put it this way. When we were in Mauritania, that the main teacher there in the Mahdara of Marabat al-Hajj didn't drink tea. But that almost all of the other scholars there did. And so there would be these Western students that would come through that would say, Marabat al-Hajj doesn't drink tea, I'm not going to drink tea. Right? Trying to match his level of zuhud when they were like beginners. Right? Now, if someone just didn't like tea, that's one thing. But if you're trying to match the level of zuhud of Marabat al-Hajj, right, at the very beginning, I don't know how wise that will really be or how long that will really last. And so that I think that, kind of seeing it as such, to me, that it does give you more energy, that there's a lot of benefits that in it, and it really gets back to your intention. And if someone, for health reasons, right, chooses, not to drink it or to avoid caffeine altogether, I think we totally have to respect that. And that's it. You want to add anything to that?
We'll take a question from the... Sorry.
Yeah, of course, Islamically, not all addiction is prohibited. So, in the chapter of tayammum, of dry ablution in Hanafi fiqh, they discuss, because the basis of making tayammum, making dry ablution, is that you don't have water or you need the water for something absolutely necessary. Right? So if you're traveling, you only have a little bit of water, you don't have to use it for wudu, because you need it to drink, you need it to make, for example, you need it to drink, to cook. But they say you can use it to cook, to tenderize the meat or the vegetables, but not for extra sauce. So the fuqaha get asked these questions, and they only discuss this because someone asked them. Said, what if you're addicted to coffee, and you only have a little bit of water? You could have used it for wudu, but if you use it for wudu, you couldn't make coffee. So, and this is, I'm not making this up, this is in Hashid al-Tahtawi on Maraq al-Falah in Hanafi fiqh. So they say that if you were not to have that coffee, it would incapacitate you from your basic worldly and religious responsibilities, then you could make tayammum, you could make the dry ablution and save up that limited amount of water to make coffee. But that's only in that extreme case. Otherwise, make wudu, right? But so that falls under that. Of course, there's a principle related to what Shaykh Yahya said, that when we talk about the nature of guidance, is that it deals with the general case, right? The general case, and the general case is different from the absolute, right? The absolute. So what's generally true is not necessarily absolutely true, and it does not necessarily apply in every particular. So there are people who can't or shouldn't do particular things. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for facilitation. There was a question that was written. I lost the paper, so please forgive me.
Can I just add one thing to that? Just one more thing came to mind about that I think is important that we consider this, is that, everything that we all mentioned, but also I do think in general that coffee is a great substitute. There are so many things out there that we can't do, and that there's so many different things that other people are drawn into. And addiction is a very serious thing, even within the Muslim community. Drug addiction and that other types of addictions. And I think that whereas in previous times people were trying to limit people's exposure to the mubahat of the permissible so that they could focus on the religion, in our times I think it's the opposite. We have to expand what is permissible as far as possible within the limits. And what I mean by that is expand by creating opportunities for people to do things within the realm of the permissible, so they don't fall into something that is worse. And I do think that's really where we're at, and I think coffee is one of those things that it is unique. It did start in the Muslim world, and that there's a lot of good that can come from it, and it's not going to be without its harms, there's no doubt, but I think that's important to mention as well, and that I would like to see, different spaces that revolve around coffee and so forth, that are alternatives for people, that are halal ways for them to have friends and socialize and so forth. So
I can't let him have that last word on coffee. One thing that, just to build on what Shaykh Yahya is saying, is that, the idea of these meaningful pastimes, right? That things that people do of the permissible that are meaningful, is that try to make your own coffee, right? Try to make your own coffee. A lot of people get very stressed out in life because everything they do is rushed. One of the most beneficial books that I read, like worldly book, is called In Praise of Slow. And because it's a general rule, it doesn't apply to every particular, such as the notable particular on my right. Our brethren south of the border are themselves sometimes rather slow. So the American title of the book is In Praise of Slowness. Right, so that it's clear. But it's a book called In Praise of Slow by Carl Honore, of how we rush through everything in life and how detrimental that is at so many levels, and that there is benefit in slowing certain things down, right? And that slowing things down is much closer to gratitude. You just get some coffee. If you're in such a rush for the coffee, as Ben Elton, the British comedian, said, if you're in such a rush to have the food, why have it go through your stomach? Just put it directly in the garbage, right? Like, if you're in such a rush, or just skip the whole thing. Like, if it's such a rush, that sometimes in the rush of the day, even at work, if you think about how long does making coffee take? It doesn't take that long. A good friend of, one of my mentors, who's a senior producer at CBC, Ustad Nazim, in the rush of his work day, he'll make coffee at work. He takes an AeroPress and he makes it. And he makes it for other people. Right? And it's very relaxing. Gives him a few minutes to be thinking about the next production, etc. He makes it for at least a couple of colleagues, depending on his mood, I guess. And it has numerous benefits, right? Similarly, when you're heading off to work, having some of these kinds of things, and you make them meaningful, it's not just about coffee. You can do the same thing, whether it's with tea, whether it's with making food, in all these things, but also, and work through any one thing when it comes to the things that you do. You like good clothes? Go. But just work through it. Where are you going to buy it from? Where is it sourced from, etc. And there's some amazing cases. Here for a long time, I was getting my beans here in the GTA from this place called the Green Beanery, and it's a non-profit. And this non-profit, all the proceeds from their sale of coffee go to fund an advocacy group. I think it's called Probe International or something. This advocacy group that basically deals with Canadian. I forget exactly how it's framed. Like basically, do you know about it? Basically about the political and environmental record of Canadian companies overseas. We've got the British touch in Canada. We're really good at looking good. Unlike our neighbors down south, we have some of the worst. Our companies have some of the worst environmental records of any country in the world. I think per capita, we're one of the worst polluters in the world. And we're really good at this kind. We learned it from the British, so we export a lot of our problems, right? So we've destroyed water reserves in many parts of South America and West Africa and elsewhere through our mining companies and so on. So there's a lot of these companies. You're buying coffee, but you're supporting people who are doing a lot of good, whether it's political advocacy or environmental advocacy or for social justice. There's a lot of people in our society that are doing good. So work through these choices. Don't focus so much on quantity, right? We're in an age of more and of quantity in the material. Like, look for things that are meaningful, right? And you'll find a lot more benefit in them. Right? Support, and these kinds of choices. And one of the ways you can learn about this, the meaning of life, spend time with elders. One of the beautiful things I learned from my father-in-law, who's a remarkable man, he mentioned, because we're talking about this idea of slowing down, etc. He does a lot of gardening. One day he mentioned that when he was working, and he's now retired, but when he used to work, he used to deliberately park his car at the end of the parking lot, as my wife does too. But I think for different reasons. So he used to choose a far away parking spot, and he used to walk extra long to the building. And several times colleagues noticed. So why do you walk extra? He said, before I go to work, I like to use that time to reflect. Right? That there's trees, that there's birds, and look at the sky, think about what I'm going to be doing during the day, etc. And these are all, this is how we bring meaning into our lives. So it's not really about coffee. Like if you hate coffee, it's not like we are trying to torture you in the seminar. It's not about coffee. It could be whatever other meaningful pursuit, right? You may like cooking, but don't just cook for mundane reasons. Cook for the sake of Allah, right? And there's amazing ways you can beautify any of these actions. Okay.
No, just kidding.
Okay. Question from the brother side?
So this will be our last question. So.
Yeah.
Yes. Go ahead.
I would start by getting a copy of the Book of Assistance by Imam al-Haddad. That's a very good place to start with approach to the deen in general. I mean, that's one of, I believe, the greatest works in Islamic history that summarizes the very essence of the deen. And let me say, one of the greatest works of Islamic history for people of this time is that it's one of the most important books I believe there is. And if you were going to say, I want one book, and I can only read one book to give me what I need to know about the essence of my deen, Book of Assistance. There's a nice section there about intention. I would start there, and then I would read the Book of Intentions by Habib Sa'ad al-Aydalus. And then if you have high spiritual aspiration, I would get a copy of the book of the Ihya Ulumuddin that treats the intention, that truth, sincerity and truthfulness. It's published and been translated into English. And within those three books is that there's plenty there to get you going in the right direction. Yeah. And I think we should just welcome all of the people that Sidi Tamer, who are all the people that came with you up from Buffalo? He brought a whole crew of people. The nomads, raise your hand. Who all came with Sidi Tamer? Allahu Akbar. MashaAllah. MashaAllah. Welcome here to Toronto, even though I'm not from here. I welcome you on behalf of Shaykh Faraz, inshallah. So the next time you have to come see us in Allentown as well. Marhaban.
My question is it too late for us to make an intention right now? Is the collective intention greater than the individual? And if the collective is great, can we make intentions together, please? And also a dua, please.
That's very demanding. The sister makes things difficult. Omar was dropping her off at home, and the GPS took us through the airport. Which is, I don't know what happened, but anyway, I'll handle just one part of that. Can you make intention after the fact? The fuqaha discussed that there's two types of actions, right? There's some actions that are singular act. There's one part to it, like that you're considered to have begun the action. It's already started. So there, you can't make an intention after the fact. An example would be the prayer, right? The time for the intention was before you began, right? Now you can, if the intention was present, you can magnify the intention, right? So you started with a weak intention, I'm praying. Then you said, okay, it's, you decide to have presence, etc. So you can have more presence in your intention, etc. But the time for the intention was at the beginning. There's other acts that are ongoing, right? Like eating, for example, which is why if you miss saying Bismillah in the beginning, you can say it during, because every bite is a new act of eating. And they say relationships are like that too, right? A relationship, you got married, they say, I just got married because... And I always hear tragic stories of why people get married, right? Like my sister was talking to some younger sisters, and someone told her, I have only one criteria for the person I want to marry. I was impressed, because usually people have too many criteria. She has to be more than 5 foot, but less than 5'3", because I'm 5'4", and she has to be more than 21, but less than 23. She has to be from, like, if there's one person like that, they already got married, right? And not to you. So my sister said, what's that one criteria? I said, he has to have 2 eyebrows, right? As if that's the most important thing. Someone got married to Mr. 2 Eyebrows. Then after the fact, you could fix the intention, right? because the action was sound. Like, you got married in a sound way. You could then upgrade your intent. You're marrying. This marriage is for the sake of Allah, etc., etc., and you refine the intention and act accordingly. So, and in most things that we do on an ongoing basis, it's not too late. Someone just showed up to a class, right? Learning is an ongoing process, so you can always renew the intention, right? And for that, one of the things that helps, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the first revelation, الَّذِي عَلَّمَ بِالْقَلَمِ, that Allah is the one who has taught by the pen. And sometimes it can help. It helps to write things down in general. I found when people come and they have problems in life, one of the things to do with your problems is to write them out. And there's actually not that many. Because I have so many problems. I said, write them out. And try to cluster them. I said, I only have 4 problems. I said, great. God bless you. All right? Honestly, it just helps to write things down. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He has taught us by the pen. Similarly, the things that you do, and this is one of the things I'd like to sort of practically, with respect to intention, for both, start with the spiritual works that you do, then the big things you do in life, your work, your family life, any ongoing activities you have, but then take it to the mundane things that are ongoing, shopping, etc. Write down and work on writing down your own intentions in these. I am seeking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through this, and inshallah you're taking notes, so you noted what Shaykh Yahya had to say, but reflect on what are my intentions? What's my intention to go shopping? Right? And it's a good, shopping is something good to start with because it seems so mundane. Right? It seems so mundane. But make a high intention. And then commit never to do something without intention. One thing that helps with that, I live online. I only have a temporary temporary non-digital existence. Turn off one-click shopping on Amazon. It'll save you a lot of money. Honestly, it was hurting my budget. But before you buy anything, pause and think, what's my intention in this? And work through when you go for your weekly grocery shopping. What is my intention? It'll affect where you go. Where will I do my shopping from? It's not just about whether No Frills versus Superstore versus this place has better prices. Which is the better place to go? For the sake of Allah, right? And so plan your life around your intentions, right? And write them down where it helps, right? Why am I visiting my parents? I have to check my intention on this quite a bit because I won't praise my mother's cooking. There's a basic principle for salvation for husbands, right? It's called the HSP, Husband's Salvific Principle, which is never praise your wife in front of your mother and never praise your mother in front of your wife, right? The wife is the wife and the mother is the mother, and never the twain can meet, right? In terms of praise, keep them, right? And there's many principles related to this is the most sensitive relationship in existence, right? For men, right? So of course, when you go visit your mother, be very careful not to sit opposite your wife when you're eating, lest she notice your satisfaction, right? But also, because it'll be used against you. And also beware of mirrors, because your face should not be reflected in the mirror as you are eating. If you will thank your mother for the food, don't thank her in front of your wife, but thank and praise in private or later, right? So in all these kinds, say, why are you visiting your parents, right? Have a written intention, right? And think it through, right? Think it through. What are the meanings? And this will beautify your actions, right? It'll beautify your actions, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. There's a question on fitrah. People can, it's a long question. We'll take one more question from the sisters, and then we'll close. Bismillah ta'ala. Can we make collective intentions? Intention itself is a personal act, right? It is a personal act, right? It is, but people coming together with common purpose is transformative, right? This is why there's so much that has come about the jama'ah. Yadullahi ma'al jama'ah. Allah's hand is with the group, right? Al-jama'atu rahmah. The group is mercy, right? And so much praise of the collective. When we ask for guidance, we ask for it collectively. Ihdina sirat al-mustaqim. So there's no doubt that individual intentions coming together for a common purpose, that is transformative. That is very transformative. And reminding oneself, each other of intentions is very transformative. So Shaykh Yahya will close with a dua after one question from the sisters, inshallah.
I just wanted to know, can you do the intention for the Coke or Pepsi too, or just the coffee?
Can you make intention for Coke or Pepsi? You could make intention for anything, but you just have to keep in mind the manifest harms of that much sugar, the corporate practices of these kinds of multinationals, right? And of course, it's not all coffee too. Can you really say, I'm drinking Nescafe for the sake of Allah, right? Or any Nestle product, to be honest, right? And not to name and shame anybody, but it seriously, if you look at some of these multinationals and the kinds of things they've done in developing countries, destroyed entire economies, ruined the health of just look at what was done with powdered milk across Africa, across Southern Asia, right? The whole, in Pakistan, for example, till 10 years ago, there was a vibrant local milk industry. Pretty much anywhere in Pakistan, you just went to your local milk shop. You got fresh raw milk that was just heated and it was delivered locally. And you could also get this boxed milk, but hardly anybody used it. But then Nestle moved in, and for several years, they sold milk below production cost. Just a few $1 million a year for them. But they completely destroyed the whole milk industry in Pakistan. All the local producers. I was in the office of the Grand Mufti of Pakistan when this really righteous looking older gentleman came, and he said, I own some milk shops, but can I sell milk that's advertised as being pure milk? Right? Khalis, doodh. Right? Khalis, like pure. But I add water to it. Of course, the obvious answer would be no. And the Grand Mufti of Pakistan did not respond. And he said, I'm already losing money. Even when because you water it down, we put some thickening agents, etc. But we still can't compete with the milk being sold, packaged, advertised everywhere, etc. But being sold below cost. Why? So that this multinational company can take over the whole milk industry. They bankrupted thousands of dairy farmers. A whole organic network. Right? And then, of course, once they took over, prices were significantly higher than they used to be. Okay? So, the Grand Mufti of Pakistan, Mufti Rafi Usmani, was sitting there, and he didn't respond to this man. I just gave him some du'as to recite. And when the man left, Mufti Rafi was crying. And he said, at that time, he was 76 years old. And you say, what can we say to these people? Right? You can't tell them, do what's wrong. But what do we say? And he just had tears going down his eyes. And he just made dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? But we have to be aware that there is a lot of harm that's being done around us. And we should not be party to harm. So this is where intentions are very serious. And a lot of these large companies that we deal, whose products we get on a daily basis, are agents of evil, like straight up, right? They're agents of evil, and we cannot avoid all harm in every way, but we shield ourselves from manifest harm, from harm that we are aware of, particularly when wholesome, good, principled, ethical, sound alternatives are found, right? And companies like Coke and Pepsi and you struck a chord here. They have how many people do they kill every year, right? People talk about who kills more people, ISIS or the Coca-Cola company, on a yearly basis. There's no competition. The Coca-Cola company are terrorists, right? They know that what they produce is of manifest harm, and they sell it in magical ways, right? It is magic, right? Social psychology is a form of modern magic, right? If you want to do yourself a favor, do not watch any advertising, and if it plays, turn off the sound. I love technology, but I do not watch any Apple ads, right? Because it's magic. They call it, there's a reality distortion field around it. I still get affected by it, notwithstanding, but we have to be careful, because there's a lot of harm, and there's good to be found. So, you could say, can we honestly say Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim before drinking Coke? Yeah, you could, but there's fundamental problems, right? There's fundamental problems, right? And Muslim countries, if you see diabetes and obesity rates and so on, right? In some Arab countries where neighbors have destroyed the water, it is cheaper to buy Coke than it is to buy bottled water, right? And it makes no sense. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala facilitate for us the good and make us of those who do things in meaningful and blessed ways. And just last thing to close with before Shaykh Yahya makes the dua. This is why a person of knowledge and a person who has prophetic guidance, it's not an accident that the Prophet ﷺ said that the birds in the sky and the fish in the oceans pray for such a person, right? And that's what we should strive to be, right? That we should be sources of mercy through the choices we make for everything in existence. That we strive to be of benefit for all that exists and of harm to nothing in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's existence. Because it is the merciful who are shown mercy by the all-merciful. Be merciful to all that is on earth, and the Lord of the heavens will be merciful to you. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala realize us in that.